I'm not a fax machine. I'm not here to like fax the Christian message to Hollywood. You know what I mean? If I was interested in messaging, that's what I should do, is make fax machines and fax people the gospel. At the end of the day, we're making art and cinema here, and there's room for interpretation of the filmmakers. There's room for interpretation for the viewer, and that's beautiful and kind of messy and wild and weird all at the same time.
This is the Act One podcast. I'm your host, James Duke. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy our podcast, please be sure to subscribe and don't forget to rate us and leave us a good review. My guest today is producer Justin Bell. Justin produces film, television, and pretty much everything in between. Some of the films he has produced include Full of Grace and Elsa and Fred with Shirley MacLaine and Christopher Plummer. He is also the former Director of Development and Production for Academy Award-winning producer Edward Saxon. In addition to being a producer, Justin also holds an MDiv from Fuller Theological Seminary and specializes in producing narrative media content for nonprofit organizations such as Compassion International, World Vision, and the Barna Group. Justin is a great guy, and we get into a lot of topics I think you will find interesting today. Here now is my conversation with Justin Bell.
Hey, Justin, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. What up, Act One community? What up, world?
Now, Justin, you, I think I first got connected with you when you were running the Act One producing program, right? Did you help create the Act One producing program?
Yeah, so I didn't really create it. What happened was Act One started as a writing program, and I don't even remember exactly what year it was, maybe in the early 2000s, 03, 04, Act One started the executive program, which was slightly broader than producing.
Yeah,
but,
I think that was 2003, at least I believe so, yeah.
I was actually a student at Fuller Seminary at the time, and I'm not an alum of Act One. I didn't go to the writing program, exec program, or the producing program, but I like to say I was Act One adjacent for several years.
That's right.
In that I worked at the Real Spirituality Film Institute with Rob Johnston, Craig Detweiler, Barry Taylor, people like that. And we used to put on kind of co-sponsored events with Barbara Nicolosi and Spencer over the DGA. Through something called the City of Angels Film Festival. So I was always a fan of Act One and always intended to, in some capacity, go through Act One, but at the time it was a writing program, and I was like, I'm not really a writer. And so I decided, unfortunately, to do grad school twice. I went to Fuller Seminary, and I decided that wasn't enough student loans. So after that, I went to the Peter Stark producing program at USC. It was sort of during that time that Act One had built up this executive program. And for several years, I worked with this producer, Edward Saxon, Academy Award winner, and continued just to be a friend of Act One. And in those years, it transitioned to the producing and entertainment executive program. Vicki Peterson was running a lot of that at the time. But what happened was I got laid off by Ed Saxon in 2010 after doing a few projects with him. He just ran out of projects to do. And then Vicki Peterson got pregnant. And I was on the job search, and my friend Terrence Barry said, hey, well, why don't you come over here and help kind of give more shape to the producing program until you find your next gig. And 4 years later, I was still helping out Act One part-time on staff. So it's kind of weird. People are like, oh, you're an alum of Act One. Technically, I'm not, but I kind of consider myself like a super senior, like one of those guys who's just always around. And I went through it 4 times as the director of the producing program, which for me was really cool and really fun. And I didn't have to pay. And I learned something every year. Like actually, everyone should go through the Act One program 4 times because the business evolves, it changes. Producing's, I mean, even right now, all the rules of production are changing. The landscape for distribution is changing. So the minute you think you know everything about producing is the moment you're going to fail, because
that's right.
It's always evolving and growing. In the same way, maybe when people are like, well, you know, I've read the Bible, so ... I know this or that, but every
That's
time
right.
you read scripture, you're in a different context, you're in a different place, you get something different out of it. And I think the entertainment business has that kind of dynamic element to it
Yep.
in the same way that we, bring ourselves to scripture and to faith.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so interesting that you said. By the way, I thought when you said that, I thought we'll forever refer to you now as the Matthew McConaughey of Act One from Daisy.
Yeah, I'm like the Kato Kalin of the Act One program. I'll even do your landscaping.
That's hilarious. No, but it's true because I just feel like sometimes there's this, and let's talk about this. There is this weird there seems to be a weird misperception or lack of perception altogether of what it is to be a producer. And the last thing a producer is like you said, someone who comes in, who knows all the answers, who has all the answers, who's got it all figured out. If anything, what I've noticed is some of the best producers I know, some of the most successful producers I know, are the ones that it's not that they have the answers, it's that they are willing to grind it out to find out what needs to get done. And they just are willing to do whatever it takes to get it done. And it has more to do with work ethic sometimes than it does with any kind of knowledge base. It's just like, you don't really have to know much of people get obsessed about, I got to know all the union rules. I got to know all the guild rules. Right. And I'm like, yes, you can know those things. But if you work really hard, maybe you can hire some people who know those things. Talk a little bit about what it is you do as a producer, because I know we all get this, this is the $1 million question we all get asked. What does a producer do? So in your context, what do you do, Justin?
Yeah. Well, I completely agree with you. I think if you had to boil down, like, what are the skills of a producer? What makes a great producer? It is problem-solving skills,
yep.
And that's creatively speaking, and also logistically, production speaking, relationally speaking. It can be in all different kinds of ways, and communication skills, creative communication, functional communication. But if you don't have those two things, I don't know how far you'll get as a producer. And that doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert or anything like that. Or they had to be a bulldog or confrontational. It's none of that. But I find producers are solution oriented. Like in giving notes, if you're going to give notes on a script, there are a lot of producers who will tell you what's wrong with this script. And that's easy. It's easy to point out what you don't like. It's easy to be a critic. What separates good producers from great producers on a development level, script development level, is they have ideas for how to make it better, like specific ideas, specific solutions that are grounded in where the story's going or what the story can be. A lot of people have ideas, but they're also just completely far afield from what the story's about. So I think it applies like at every phase of producing, development, pre-production, production, post, distribution, to have that kind of savvy. At the Stark program, Larry Terman, who he produced The Graduate, Academy Award-winning producer. He says that the number one element a producer needs is savvy, is just to be savvy. That's his word. I like to say problem solving. But in terms of what I do, it's a blend of things. And some of that is a function of, I think, my personality, but also my fear of failure and survival skills maybe in this business. But about half my time is film and television, and the other half is in branded entertainment and in nonprofit media. I started in the nonprofit world. I'm a preacher's kid. My parents were in Christian TV and radio and publishing as a kid. So a lot of my early opportunities as a filmmaker were like making content for Bono's One campaign or World Vision, Compassion, those kinds of Christian organizations. And at the time, I was a little bit more of a predator. I don't know if everyone uses that word, but a producer, director, editor, someone who just did it all. I was one-stop shop. Like, sure, I'll go out. I'll go to, South Africa on a motorcycle and shoot your documentary and come back and edit it. And that's really fun. Like, that's how I started, Yeah. And for a while I thought I'd maybe be a director or even an actor or a writer. And what I learned over time was that it was really my project management skills and my problem solving skills that were elevating. There was always somebody who could shoot something a little bit better than me, or edit something a little bit better than me, or had a little bit better ideas than I did. But in terms of like pulling it all together, getting a project up and running and seeing it through, that seemed exciting to me and something I was uniquely built for. You were going to ask a question, but
No, I was going to say, when you say predator, you're not you mean the from the movie Predator?
no, not predatorial. No, nothing like that. I mean, like that's a hyphenate kind of hybrid jargon.
That's hilarious.
Somebody who does a little bit of everything. And I still sometimes will get a call for something like that. And I'm like, I really wish I could do that. I'm not good at that anymore, or if I don't even know how to touch Adobe Premiere. Like as a producer now, like all I touch is a phone and a computer and Zoom calls,
Yep. I used to be I'm a self-taught editor 20 years ago. Like if you were to put me in front of a Final Cut Pro system today, it would take me probably a month to figure it out again, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I separate producing into two categories. I think the core definition is a producer is someone who causes a film or a show to get made. So basically, if you were to like pluck that producer out of the equation, there would be no project, like period. Now, how that happens is different in every project, and every producer brings different strengths to causing this thing into reality. So some producers are really great at financing. This is something that I've sort of struggled with. Like, well, I'm not like a MBA, Harvard, Wall Street guy. Like, I'm not even all that interested in that stuff.
Exactly.
But there is a piece of producing. Like, if you can show how a movie makes sense from a business perspective or financially, that can get people excited and putting money into your project. I also see projects that have money but go nowhere because then it can't get packaged with talent. The script's no good. So that's not the only piece. But there are producers who have that kind of economic strength they bring to everything. That's something I've had to learn over time. It wasn't natural to me. I feel like I'm good at it, but I'll never be great at it. Then there are producers who are really great at overseeing production, right? Their budgets are solid, their schedules are solid, like the plan on the ground is great. They know how to maximize the incentives. Like they kind of have a packaging and management skill. They don't know how to raise the money, but they know how to spend the money really well. And they're known for delivering a great product. That's also something that I didn't start knowing, but it's something I've grown into, and I find I've learned over time I'm actually pretty good at that, and I enjoy that. And that's sort of that pre-production, that kind of soft late development into pre-production phase of like, how are we going to get this over the top? Okay, now we got money. How are we going to make this? I find that really fun because if you're just developing all day or just raising money, you feel like you're spinning your wheels. But the moment you think you might have something real, like even if it's not 100%, it's just getting close. And now we're going to build a plan and start like, this is a moving train, or at least we're going to tell people this is a moving train. I love that. I love that phase. But I've had to learn from other people how the unions work, how payroll works, how all that works. And there's a certain phase of it, a certain like depth of it that I'm also not interested in, because I've realized I'm interested in kind of getting this thing off the ground and then delivering at the end. Yep. But I don't really want to know how payroll works or workers' comp works. So I surround myself with people who know that stuff way better than me. And then there are producers who are great with material. They're avid readers. They read every book, upcoming book. They read a ton of articles. They just know the great young screenwriters out there. And these tend to be people who start in creative development. They work for another producer or another production company, or they might even they might be a writer as well, where they have a co-writing partner. So they may not be necessarily a business person or like someone who loves being on set all day, but they know great material and they know how to develop that with writers. So my unfortunate position is I don't think I'm like any one of those things. I'm just a little bit of a jack of all trades who sort of came up in the development area, and then I've learned more about production. So I would say development and production are my strengths, and then I have to bring in kind of that financing help or people on the back end for marketing and distribution. And beautiful thing about producing is people produce often in teams. You know, there's usually only one director, sometimes two directors, right? And then you're just working with how that director works and trying to find other people, the DP to balance them out, or the AD to balance out that director's tendencies. In producing, there's 2, 3, 5 producers on a project, and hopefully everyone comes at it from a different area of strength. And I think you'll find it takes time to figure out what kind of producer you are or what producer you want to become. And you can grow some, but I think ultimately we all drift towards what our natural strengths will be at the end.
What made you want to become a producer? What was it that what flipped the switch for you?
I think like the early seeds of it was I grew up in a fairly artistic family. My mom was a musician. My grandfather was a music professor. There was a lot of, you know, going to museums, going to movies. We go and see like 3 movies on a Sunday. You know, every Christmas, I think there was one year we saw 4 movies one day, and that included King Kong. It was like a 3.5 hour film.
Nice. Awesome.
So there's a certain kind of cinephile element in my family. And I grew up in a fairly conservative community of Wheaton, Illinois, which is the shining city on a hill. It's a little bit like Grand Rapids, Michigan, or Colorado Springs. There's a lot of evangelical organizations and publishing, and it's a place I really appreciate. But I think my immediate family also loved the arts. And I remember seeing movies like, you know, The Last Temptation, The Mission, and my parents would make a point of having like family discussion afterwards to really unpack all that stuff. So I don't think I really knew I wanted to be a producer at the time. Most people don't even know what a producer is. Even if they're in the business, sometimes they don't even know what it is. So in terms of like that I wanted to be an artist, I think it started there. And then in my college years, I think some of it was bred out of frustration because I was acting a little at the time. I was directing a little at the time. I was that kind of predator performer as a whole. And then I remembered I got cut. I'd never been cut from anything as an actor. And I got cut from the college acting troupe. And they're like, hey, you can like operate the lights if you want. And you could stick around. You could be like the equipment manager kind of a thing. And it cut me to my core so bad. Like this was the moment I realized I should not be an actor, because I took it so personally that I was like, I'm going to show these guys, I'm going to create my own opportunities. So it kind of started from a very negative, reactionary, sinful place. I don't know, you could say. But by then I kind of knew I wanted to be some kind of artist. I just didn't really know what that meant. So it became a process of elimination at some point. Like, oh, acting, boy, that's hard. Like, I don't know if I could take that. And what happened is I had a college classmate. I went to Wheaton College, which is not known for its cinema or filmmaking or anything. I was an English major. But I had a friend who was going to USC's summer program to go make an 8mm film, 16 millimeter film at 8 minutes long, something like that. And he's like, why don't you join me in the class? And this is the late 90s, Jimmy. It was crazy. It was wild. People were still editing on flatbeds, shooting on real film.
Yes.
They were debating.
I remember all of that. Yes.
They were debating whether people should shoot digitally at all and what that would mean. So I did a whole summer at USC summer school undergrad, where I made a short film, black and white film, and I loved it. I had a great time. But it was the first time I heard about the Peter Stark producing program and what a producer was. And I was like, wait a second. That sounds like me. Like that sounds a little bit more like me than what I'm doing here. So that was really the first time I was like, I think I want to be a producer. I was 21 years old, living in the Midwest, and I was like, I want to be a Hollywood producer. And from there, it became about how am I going to go about that. Being who I am, with what I care about, the kind of stories I want to tell. I had no connections. I know a lot of church people. I didn't know any entertainment people outside of the classmates at USC. So that kind of kicked in to high gear of how I was going to figure that out.
That's really interesting. I think a lot of people are similar in that they don't know what they want to do. They just know they want to do something connected to film. And oftentimes proximity helps you start to figure out, what you want to do, what you can do, what you're capable of doing. And that's why I always encourage young filmmakers to just, try your hand at something, right? Try and, if your friend's making a short film, go do art department for them. Go do, go work in the, go do costuming for them. Go, be a PA, do whatever, try acting. And then you start to figure out what it is that you're interested in, what it is you're capable of doing, and what you think you can actually start to. And then also some people, they realize in that process, I don't want to do any of this.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, at least you tried,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm the king of mixed metaphors. I always throw out these mixed metaphors and realize later I just said it wrong. But, I think like a ship that's already sailing in the water is easier to steer than one that's in the harbor. And I remember specifically, I was really torn between, do I go to film school or do I go to seminary? Because I've always been interested in ministry in the church and how worship is done in the church as it relates to arts. I worked at Willow Creek as a creative director. There's a big mega church in Chicago for a couple of years. I never wanted to give that away. That was some of my struggle. I was like, I see kind of those Hollywood stories and like, it kind of feels like me, but how do I bring my passions to that? How do I bring my faith to that? I didn't have a model until I moved out here, so I actually chose, the way I really got out to Los Angeles the first time is by going to Fuller Theological Seminary. And from the outside, that seems like a misstep. Like, it seems like, well, why would you do that? Like, why would you, if you want to be a producer? I knew I wanted to be a producer at the time.
Right.
But I had attended the City of Angels Film Festival and met, half a dozen Fuller filmmakers, people like, Craig Detweiler, this writer, Stu Hazeldine, who wrote The Shack. He was a friend of Fuller. Scott Derrickson was in and around the program at the time. Ralph Winter. I mean, all kinds of great people. And I kind of came out because of the community. I was like, I thought I was going to be the only Christian out here. I really did. Like, how egocentric was that? I thought I'd be able to get all the Christian money. They'd be like, I'm gonna be the one Christian who's producing out there. All the rich Christians would give me money. That was really my mentality. Which here I am 15 years later, and then that still hasn't happened.
I was like, you're still looking for that Christian money, aren't you?
Other people have handed me money, but so I was, in some ways, I was kind of disappointed that I wasn't the first, because I wanted to be a trailblazer like so bad. But then very quickly, I realized this was a huge blessing, that there was already hundreds of Christians in town who wanted to do mainstream material. Like, I've never really been interested in quote unquote Christian movies. I wanted to just be who I was explicitly and explore great artistics projects that way. People at Fuller seemed to get that. I went to some other places where they didn't seem to get it. But Fuller was already doing it and already had people who were doing it. And I was like, I don't really know what this means, but I'm going to start here because it just makes sense. Makes sense for me. And that's also part of what got me into the Peter Stark producing program, because I mean, their acceptance ratio is like 17-1. It's like twice as hard as Harvard undergrad. I've never had great grades. I'm not like a big test guy. But when I interviewed there, they're like, what have you been doing? Like, you've been working at this film institute that consults studios when they have movies they want to market to churches? Like, we never even heard of that. And you're not handing us a tract or anything. You're like, you know something about filmmakers. And I don't know. I think I was just different enough for them. And I had researched the program and had known about it for 5 years that they gave me a shot. But that was my just put the ship into the water and start sailing. because it got me out here and it's got me connected, and I started to understand what this environment was, and it bought me a couple of years to kind of make some moves and stuff.
And how long have you been working out here?
Well, I spent my first 5 years out here working part-time and in full-time grad school. So if you don't count that, and all that kind of work was sort of Predator editing stuff for Christian Ministries, consulting with the studios on faith material. A lot of it was entertainment related, but it wasn't producing mainstream movies and TV. So that piece didn't really kick in until I went to the USC Stark program, because they give you a mentor and they put you in a paid internship. And the second year of the program only meets at night, so you can work up to full time. So I really kind of consider that my start in Hollywood, and I was about 27 at the time. I'm 41 now, and I have a lot of stories about those early days, like post seminary and trying to get started in the Hollywood producing space, and what people thought of me, or at least my own self-perception and how I navigated that. Like, are you a priest or something? What are you trying to do?
Are you a rabbi? What are you? I used to, one of my all-time favorite conversations I had with someone when I first got started out here, when I was working at Warner Brothers, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but it was during Y2K, right before Y2K. And my friend kept asking me, so what's going to happen? And I was like, what do you mean? How do I know? And he goes, well, you're a Christian. Like, isn't it like the world? Don't you think Jesus is going to blow the world up or something?
Aren't you a dispensationalist?
Yeah,
come on.
I said, no, I don't think Jesus is going to blow the world up in the year 2000. It was pretty fun. So you're married, have a family. This town, as you and I both know, it can wreak havoc on families, on marriages, on relationships. How have you and your wife, how have you guys navigated those tricky waters? Do you lay down ground rules in terms of how long you're gone for certain shoots? Or I'm just curious, I'm sure people want to hear, people who are interested in coming out here, there's a real cost. Like I try to be very clear with people who are, in the Act One program, we talk about this a lot, is there's a real cost to working in this business when it comes to families and relationships. And if you're not careful, it can cost you more than you want to pay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a great question. I think I'm fortunate in that my wife, she's from Los Angeles. She grew up in this world, and she's not in entertainment. She's an attorney, completely unrelated. But, I kind of grew up in the Midwest. Hollywood was sort of this otherness, and they had this mystique about it. And I think, like in my mind, I will always feel like an outsider, even if I'm not. It's just it's a mentality I've tried to shake. But in Hollywood, to me, is much more personalized now, because it's actual people that I've worked with, not just a sign. But for her, like, that mystique isn't really there at all, because she grew up with people whose parents were in the business and all that. So there's a little less, it's not on a pedestal in a way. And I think that helps. And then we met when I was already doing this. So there was a little bit of it is what it is, like take it or leave it. And also she has her own career and her own life and community. And some of that, for us has been about kind of fusing that all together, versus there's some couples who are like, they're co-writers, they produce together. And I've actually kind of admired that a lot and sort of envisioned that a little bit, like how cool would that be if they're both artists? But then you realize for couples like that, there's like real high highs and there's real low lows, because they're both succeeding or they're both not succeeding, or one's doing great while the other's not. And so I think there's something like, if the family, if you're both in the entertainment space, it has different types of challenges, not wrong or better, just different. And I think I came in thinking I would have those types of challenges. And the way my marriage is it's just different. It's just a little bit different than that. So one of the things I love about my wife, she does give me a decent amount of freedom. I spent a month in India last summer, and I spent 6 months in New Orleans on a movie with Shirley MacLaine after we've been married. I think it's changed a little bit since we've had kids. I've become a little more selective, like making the $500,000 movie out of town, or like the low budget feature. I've started to pass on those. I'm trying to like exec produce a little bit more, where I can structure a project or advise or do a piece without necessarily having to be the muscle on the ground all the time. I think it's also helped. The branded entertainment world has helped me some, because those shoots are also very short. They're 2, 3, 4 days. Money's never the problem with those. They always have money, but they want to do things like fast. So those tend to be over before you know it, and that's half my time. So I think the diversification of the types of projects I've done and the type of skills I bring to it have afforded me a little bit of not having to be on set all the time. Who I really feel for, like the DPs or the gaffers, or there are certain roles in this business that require you to be on set. Like if you're not on set, you're not getting paid, and you're there 12, 14 hours a day. I think those are especially challenging. And creative producing, there's some flexibility, because you'll go months at a time where you're just developing and you're in an office and you're itching to get back to set. But each project, my wife and I, we have to talk about whether it's worth it. It's the equation of, is it exciting? Am I excited to do it? Is it something that will help, my career? And is it something positive for my family? And is it going to, with 2 kids and a working wife, we don't have a lot of family nearby either. It's not like we can just drop the kids over at mom's house.
The best part about sometimes having a spouse who isn't in the business is that you have that, that voice, that common sense voice that isn't affected by other stuff. They're just looking at it from their perspective.
Yeah, and sometimes when you don't have a spouse in the business, there's a little more explaining, like why you're going to that screening, or why, like, well, you're not getting paid to do that. Why are you doing that? All very reasonable stuff. But when you have a spouse that's in the business, they seem to, like, there's a little less of a, like, have to get it factor. They get it. But I think you're susceptible to the ups and downs of the business. I mean, we could talk about, I think diversification of the types of projects, especially in today's age, with everything, distribution changing, a lot more digital types projects. I think some of that 6-month set life is changing, and with the pandemic as well. I think the way productions are shot is going to evolve.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, there's a lot of conversation. Probably by the time people hear this, there'll be some implementations. We're recording this, during the lockdown period during the pandemic, and so probably by the time people hear this, there'll probably be some things that are being implemented. But what are your thoughts? What are you hearing? I'm sure you have some projects that you were probably prepping to be shot either now or at a future date that have been put on hold. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my sense is at minimum, production costs are going to go up 20%. And that's related to, I think there should be like a distinct department for safety and health.
I agree.
Just like a medic on set, like
Yep.
you kind of have that version for safety and stunts. Like
Yep.
I think there'll be a new department,
Yep.
which I think long term is a good thing. I remember I did this Vicks NyQuil and Dayquil commercial one time, and I had the flu the entire time while making the Dayquil commercial, and I kept it afterwards. It was like 20 bottles, and I like blazed through those in like 3 months or something. So anyway, my point is, like, I usually get sick after being on set for a long time, and it's a combination of being around people and a combination of just working really hard, and then your body, the adrenaline wears off, and your body's like, okay, it's time for you to get sick now. So I don't think that's a bad thing, but certainly there's going to be some cost implications, and then we'll have to shoot slower for the foreseeable future, because not every department can be in the same space at the same time. And then some of those bigger sequences with a lot of real background, those will have to go away or be shot differently for the foreseeable future. But yeah, I definitely don't. I mean, if I had all the answers, somebody would be paying me to come up with a plan. But right now, I've been kind of this weird space, because I have this India Procter & Gamble project that's 284 videos that I shot last year. It's 8 feature films worth of commercial content. I'm still editing those. And then I have a couple projects that are just like interviews with animation and motion graphics, and those can continue because I can shoot those remotely from people's homes. Oh. And then I have another project where we're shipping toys to kids' homes, and they're like showing us how the toys work with their parents shooting on their iPhone. So strangely, there's still some production going on. And for me, I feel like for the next 6 months, I'm only going to have these sort of like lower key type projects. And that's where I'm glad that I'm actually in branded entertainment, that I'm doing projects for Christian organizations, because many of those aren't 50, 100, 200 people on set.
The long-term shifts are going to be really good. The short-term effects of these shifts could be painful for a while for a lot of people. And yeah, that's the part that I feel like as people of faith, we have to kind of shift a little bit. I was talking to someone else about this. We have to shift a little bit our mindset of we're suffering too. And we can't wait for the suffering to stop in order for us to be a blessing and benefit to other people who are also suffering. Like, I think what God is trying to remind many of us, certainly me, is that it's in the midst of the suffering. What are you going to do? Are you going to sit and wallow in your pain and your suffering and your despair? Or are you actually going to accept the fact that real bad things do happen, and they're also happening to other people at the same time? And can you stop thinking about yourself long enough to go over here and actually be a blessing and benefit to other people? This, to me, is the real work of the church, right? The real work of the church, the real work of Christians in this business right now. What it means to be a person of faith in this business right now is, how do we help take care of those who are suffering, even when we ourselves are not doing well, even when we're not sure where our paycheck is coming from, or what have you. And I think that if we need to remind ourselves almost daily of our role in this business. Our role is different. We're supposed to be different.
Preach it, man. I love it. I forget, Jimmy, what a great preacher you are. I like just hearing you go for it sometimes. But I completely agree with you. Like, if you were going to ask me the question of like, what does it mean to be a Christian in entertainment or whatever, my answer would be 20% of it is content, in my opinion. Like, in my experience, maybe 20% of the time I work on something that personally means something very important to me. And I feel lucky that that's the percentage. Some people it's 0, right? But I feel, especially as a producer, 80% of what it means to bring my faith to the table is how I conduct myself.
That's right.
On a show.
That's right.
Paying people on time, making sure people are safe.
That's right. Treating
background actors like they're real people. One of my friends, Matt Webb, who's also a former Act One staff guy, has something called
up in Huntington, right? He's the
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He's had something for a long time called the Kinema Commonwealth. I think it's what it's called. The Kinema rules. And for I'll try to find it. I can send it to you. And this is all pre-pandemic. It was just, what are things that we can do differently on set that might be a little more Christian than perhaps how the business is built? And so some of those, and some of them I'm like not so sure about. They're a little radical. I'm like, that's not practical. Come on, man. But one thing he does that I do agree with is everyone on set is called talent, right? Hollywood likes to call actors, they're the talent, and don't talk to the talent, and talent's coming and talent's flying in, that kind of stuff. And on Matt Webb sets, everyone's talent. He calls everybody talent. I love that. Something that LC does I find a little more radical is like he won't block a sidewalk for pedestrians to, like, he won't stop business ever. You know, he'll just go and shoot it again as somebody walks through because he feels like it interferes with the local community or whatever, like the way we treat communities as productions and thinking through that. Anyway, there's some really nice stuff in Matt's Kinema, but it's kind of thinking theologically about the logistics of production and what we're really saying and doing and treating people. And I think right now is a really appropriate time for the entire business, but also Christians, to take a step back and think through how do we do that moving forward? Because, you know, being on set 12 to 14 hours a day out of town for 6 months at a time, and some people live that way all the time, is really spiritually draining and hurts marriages, hurts relationships, hurts people physically. So there does have to be a better way. And I hope, you know, like you said, that we as people of faith realize that it's not about escaping our suffering or whatever. The sufferings are always with us. And when an event like this happens, it only just highlights sort of the existential place we're always in. There's always people, obviously not to this scale, but there's always people dying around us and hurting and secretly suffering. And at the end of the day, I'd rather focus on the people that are around me and what I'd rather work on some really lame commercial and for everybody to have stepped away from that and saying, I don't know about that show, but it was just different. I'd rather have that than to work on my epic mission, you know, the mission style feature, and for people to walk away and be, what a miserable movie that was. What a hack that all those producers were, and people got hurt. I'd much rather have that. I don't think I could have said that 15 years ago.
Yep.
When I think the material was so important to me at all costs. And now the process is so much more critical.
And you know this, and this is what we talk about at Act One all the time, is that there's such a focus of people coming into the business on the content they're going to create. The content they're going to create, it's got to be, you know, the greatest, you know, quote unquote Christian cinema ever made, all this kind of stuff. And you're so true. I might even argue with you, probably lower percentage than 20%, in the sense that we are the product that we're creating, like who we are on set, who we are in those, in those edit bays, who we are, in those writers' rooms and in those executives' offices, like on set, who we are. That's the product we're producing. And, I don't think I realized how much I cared more about, I think the shift for me in caring more about the people than the product was when I actually started doing more stuff and building up friendships with people and living life with people. And now that, my kids play with their kids and I go to, hang out, and it's like you're living life with human beings that have real life struggles and pains and marriage issues and their own dreams that they're struggling to try to live out and all that kind of stuff. And you realize, man, so much of what we're trying to do doesn't really match up to kingdom work. Does that make sense? Like, it's like we're so obsessed with, that making that next great film that we forget that it's the process of making that film with all these other people. The beauty of filmmaking, this collaborative process where you get to work with all these other amazing artists and creators and just people who are giving so much of their blood, sweat, and tears to this project, is the joy that we get to have of actually working alongside them, being with them, living life with them. And to me, like, I look at Jesus's teachings and I think to myself, in many respects, he's trying to make us more human. Like, we keep trying to aspire to be less human, right?
Mm-hmm.
To avoid pain, to avoid, the hard road. And really life includes all these things. And so it's not about the elimination. I think this is where I may differ with some of my Buddhist friends, right? is the gospel of Jesus isn't about the elimination of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the contextualization of suffering and understanding it and working through it, and helping other people in the midst of that suffering.
I love it. Jesus suffers alongside us.
Yeah, but I digress. See, you're it's what I took me 10 minutes to say. You just said it in one.
Yeah, I don't know how much time we have, but I think about it in terms of like truth, goodness, and beauty, sort of the three pillars of
That's right.
spiritual exploration. And what I love, I mean, I grew up in the evangelical environment. I think this story is a little bit different for Catholics. But, in the 1980s, evangelicals didn't really believe movies did anything, and I think there was this resurgence in the 90s where it was like, wait a second, art matters, art is powerful, like we need to be doing more with that. And I caught that vision, I caught that excitement, and I think that was a really great pivot by a lot in the Christian evangelical world. But I think the flip side of that arc is a little bit of magical thinking that, like, if we can make the great movie, it'll solve all of our problems, all of our PR problems, all the way people see us. And I have a few problems with that is, at the end of the day, it's just a movie. Like, maybe all I do is inspire somebody to sit on their couch, eat some popcorn, drink, one too many glasses of wine and pass out before the movie's over. Like, if that movie's not supported by like some kind of grounded community on the back end where like someone could talk about that movie or follow up on that, like at the end of the day, it's just a product in a way. But also, it's not one movie. It takes a lot of movies that are good like that to make any kind of change, so we need to be making 5 movies a year like that to make any kind of impact. It can't just be one. But
I think what you're arguing for is for all those Christians with the money that you were talking about earlier.
That's right.
They invest in a slate. They want to invest in a slate of films, right? Your slate of films, not just your.
Yeah. Can I leave my number at the end of this podcast? Can I plug all my projects right now? Send me that Christian money. No. But that's, I mean, I don't know if we have time for any of this now, but I have found.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the people who have mentored me or that I've been apprenticed by or have really given me some of my best shots have not been the people I expected. I expected kind of the rich evangelical people,
That's right. That's right.
God bless them. I'm not saying anything wrong about that, other than I feel like there's a lot of complaining about what's going on in Hollywood without putting money where people's mouths are, but the people who have given me wax, I was surprised by, and with the Act One producing students when I was there, I was always challenging them to be open to who those people might be. One of those people for me was Ed Saxon, who was Jonathan Demme's producing partner for 20 plus years. Ed produced The Silence of the Lambs, won Best Picture for that, produced Philadelphia, adaptation, Something Wild, a lot of great movies in the 80s and 90s. And Ed would describe himself as a Jewish pantheist. And the first time I met him was for my internship interview. And it was him and his development exec. And Ed didn't say a word to me the entire time. He just sort of smiled at me and bowed every time I opened my mouth. It was really weird. So his exec was asking me questions. I'm answering the questions. And here he is just kind of smiling and bowing. And he's wearing full tilt African garb, like a female African garb thing. And I was like, what a weird guy. And anyway, I got the internship, and I only interned 1 day a week because I didn't have time or money to do more than that because it was unpaid. And I spent all this time, getting him gum at the convenience store and all the internship stuff nobody wants to do, making photocopies, going to the dry cleaner. And, every day he would come in wearing a different costume. So like another day was like a Civil War outfit with like the sword and the sheath and everything. But probably 5 weeks went by and he didn't actually talk to me. He just smiled and nodded at me for like 5 or 6 weeks. I was like, what is going on with this guy? I was sort of intimidated. And then finally, 6 weeks in, around lunchtime, he's like, hey, Justin, right? I was like, yeah, Justin. He's like, are you like a seminary grad? Did I hear you're a seminary grad? I was like, yes. He's like, oh, so do you do pastoral counseling? I mean, this is the first thing the guy ever said to me. And I was like, well, my brother's a therapist. I've taken some classes on therapy. I want to be a filmmaker, but sure, I know a little something about pastoral counseling. I'm thinking like, this guy, he's yanking me around. Like, that's a Christian catchword, pastoral counseling with, he's like, come into my office at lunch. I want to talk to you. I'm like, okay. So I go in there at lunch, and he's like, what if I told you I had a paralyzing fear of death? What kind of Christian advice would you have for me? And I was like, okay, this is strange. So I just sort of laid out, and I was Jimmy Duke in the moment, man. I just went for it. And I'm not like a great evangelist. I didn't like necessarily get into this to hand out tracts. I mean, I'm open, and people ask me, I'll share, So I just shared my faith with Ed there and gave him some tips. And he's like, okay, go away. Thank you. Go back to making copies. And then the same thing happened the next week. He's like, come to my office at lunch. And he's like, I'm having this relationship problem. What kind of Christian advice you got for me? And same thing. I kind of just talked to him about that. And I mean, this went on for weeks. And I left the internship actually incredibly angry at God, because I was like, I learned nothing there. Like, I just made photocopies and got this guy his lunch. I should send him a bill for all the free therapy I just gave him. I mean, knowing him really well now, I knew a little better what was going on. But for 6 months, I did not understand that experience. I was like, I just worked for this kind of wacky producer who dressed up every day and then just sort of like quizzed me about my faith every Friday. I learned nothing. And that's not why I'm here. I mean, I'm here to be salt and light, but I didn't know that it would be like that. So several months went by and I'm doing other stuff. And he randomly calls me. He's like, what are you doing right now? He's like, oh, I'm interning at Sony Animation. I don't know, making $8 an hour. He's like, well, I realized something. I like you. I don't think you know anything about the movies or entertainment at all, but I'm making this movie with Sam Mendes. Do you know who Sam Mendes is? And I didn't, but I lied and said, yeah, I know who Sam Mendes is. Only won, Academy Award for American Beauty. Didn't know his name. So Ed was right. I knew nothing. He's like, I'm making this movie. My exec just quit. I'm not sure if I trust you, but how about I'll give you like a 1 month shot to be my creative executive. And if you're no good, if you don't know my Rolodex in and out, if you don't know all my scripts, if it doesn't seem like you know how to do this job, I'll fire you. How does that sound? And I said, great. And I quit. The next day I was working for him, and that was a four-year run, but it completely came out of relationship. And he's like, I never have even met a Christian before, but I just like talking to you and feel like I should give you a shot. So to this day, we still have these types of conversations. I haven't converted Ed over. I've prayed with him a couple times. But he's probably my best friend in his business. Yeah, and he's someone who is interested in my spiritual point of view, and interested in the kind of stories I want to tell. And it's a person who has looked out for me. But on paper, we have nothing in common.
And that's okay. And that's the thing. That's the magic of friendship. That's the magic of actually connecting with other people. Is sometimes on paper it doesn't make any sense at all, but there was something truthful about you that he didn't get from other people, that he enjoyed having those conversations with you. He enjoyed being able to ask those questions because like you said, he didn't know anybody else to ask. And that's a what? Wait, what were the costumes for? Did you ever find it?
Oh yeah, I didn't wrap that up. At the time, his daughter was like 7 and 3, and he was dropping them off at school, dressed up just for fun. And what I realized is that, I mean, he's just a very fun guy.
That's
Even
awesome.
to this day, sometimes he'll call me at like 5:30 in the morning, and I don't even work for him anymore. And he'll just sing to me. He'll just call me sometimes and just want to sing for me. And probably one of the most curious, inquisitive, spiritually searching people I've ever met in my life.
Wow, that's awesome. And what do you think is? Do you think that's part of the secret to his success? Like, the time that you've spent with him, looking at his abilities, do you think his curiosity is something that has really worked to his advantage?
I think so. I mean, I can remember we travel on, I remember this distinct moment. There was, we were shooting Away We Go, which was the Sam Mendes movie. And like across the street was some kind of like art in the park, fart in the park kind of, setup kind of thing. And it was like people like smithing swords, and it was a very unique kind of thing happening across the street. And so when we wrapped that day, Ed was like, "Hey, come on, let's go across to the carnival and get some cotton candy and look at the belts that are for sale and stuff, And he's like, "Hey, Sam," who's a very proper Englishman, lovely, but kind of a serious guy, "Sam, come over with us," And Sam's kind of like, "Why would I go over to the carnival? That looks terrible, like not clean or anything." And Ed's like, "Come on, yeah, let's go." And like we're in there, in the photo booth taking pictures together. He's like trying on the boas. And I think some of his secret is like he's very kind of salty. Like he's not, with all of his success, he's still very connected to like normal life and normal things and what means something daily. And he finds joy. I think it's the curiosity and the joy. Like one rule he had when I worked for him was, we're gonna do something fun every day that has nothing to do with work. So like every day we'd make this is all before like Vine and YouTube stars, but every day I would have to like shoot a video for him of him just doing something stupid.
Really?
Or whatever.
Wow, that's great. I love this guy. That's awesome.
Yeah. So there's people like that. I mean, there's other people as well. There's been great, wonderful Christian people and all that, but you never know kind of where your mentor is going to come from.
That's right. What was it like working with Sam Mendes? I kind of have this long-standing theory about him, in that, if I remember correctly, Spielberg hired him. He was a theater director, and for stage, and Spielberg kind of plucked him out of there to do American Beauty for DreamWorks, and they put him with Conrad Hall. And so you have this amazing, so you get, so all the, if you remember, all the performances get nominated and win the Academy Awards because he's able to sit there with those beautiful actors and craft these amazing performances. And Conrad Hall just, shoots the heck out of it. Mm-hmm. And then it just seemed like Mendes has this amazing approach of hiring the best technicians around him so that he can do his expertise, which is, working with the actors. And so did you see any of that? What were some of your thoughts?
Well, absolutely. Well, once Sam got attached as the director, it became very easy to cast the movie because actors loved working with him. It was just that simple. They all wanted to be in the Sam Mendes business. So definitely for that. I also remember we had a lot of rehearsals. He rehearsed a little bit more than some other directors. Also, he stayed in the Video Village a lot more than some other directors. He's very, in my experience, sort of very steady, very calm, kind of talks to a few people, and like you were saying, very skilled people around him who do their job. So I think he's good at kind of building the team around him. And he really focuses a lot on the actors. He doesn't get into the minutia of the technical stuff or is walking away complaining about the food or, just like producing, every director has a different strength. And I think at the end of the day, he's got that ability to bring the best out of actors. And he, Ellen Kuras shot that movie, and he just works with great DPs and has a great visual taste as well. But he's very, the worst thing is a director who doesn't know what he or she wants, and Sam's not that person. He will always tell you what precisely what he wants, and that sometimes can be really hard to pull off, right? Because a lot of what a producer is getting all the stuff there so the director can do their job. And sometimes I described it as like the Sam Mendes wake. I don't think he realized at times how hard he made other people's jobs, but it was only because he was being really specific about where we were going. And I'd much rather have that. I'd rather work my tail off to get something I know is going to work, and that's, versus a lot of waffling. He's not a waffler at all. But there's other directors who, I did this one web series where we had the same crew, but we swapped out the actor and the director midway, actors and director midway, a little bit like a TV show. And it was like a chemistry test of like, here's the exact same locations of the exact same crew, and we're just going to switch the directing and acting team out and see what happens. And it was like completely different. Like one director, very strong with like, I want to be on this lens, I want to have these lights. But they kind of also at times like, okay, actor, lift that. The actors were sort of a cog in the wheel of the technology that was going on. And the other director really kind of had a theater background and only really knew how to work with the actors and kind of had to trust the crew members around, the DP and the gaffer, to pull that off. And that at times frustrated the crew, because people would be like, where am I supposed to put this? It's the director decided what the actors were having a great time, but the crew was, with the other director, the crew was like, yeah, we're on this. The crew was ready, always ready. And the actors were like, when do I get to act? I feel like I'm just a cog here,
Yeah, and and you don't know how well you're going to work with different people types until you do. That's my big encouragement for people is I'm like, just try. You've got to start trying stuff. You've got to put yourself out there and learn as best you can by doing. I know that that's easier said than done sometimes, but as much as possible, put yourself out there, work, volunteer, intern, just get yourself on sets, learning the process, and I think you'll be all the better for it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I sometimes wish I had taken that advice more, because I get to set and I don't know what all the equipment's called, because I didn't really PA and grip and kind of come up through the production system. And at times that I've like lost respect from certain crew people. They're like, who's this pro producer flying in? Doesn't know what they're talking about. Whereas some of my partners, producing partners, that's how they started.
Yeah.
And the crew would listen to them, but not to me. I've gotten a little better at that over time. So yeah, especially, my theory is in your 20s, all experience is good experience. Like your 20s is a giant hot mess of trying stuff. You don't need to know anything. You need to know the only answer you need to have is, what do you want to do right now? And what are your favorite movies? Like if you don't have answers for that, like people won't kind of understand how to engage you. But even now that I'm in my 40s, maybe I should throw my 30s in there too. But nobody really needs to have any kind of direction, I don't think, on the entertainment business, what they want to do until they're well into their 30s. Until then, gain experience, try stuff, meet people. Because most people who get opportunities, it's because they're being apprenticed by somebody, like a production designer, right? You start in the art department and there's just a production designer who keeps hiring you for all their projects. And suddenly you now are getting hired as an art director apart from that person. And then you get your own production. So producing's like that too. It's a bit of a apprenticeship type business, and producing covers everything. That's why the Act One program went from executive program to producing an executive program, realizing like as a producer, you need to know a little bit about everything. You don't have to be the expert. You need to know what you don't know.
That's right.
And surround yourself with the people who do know.
Yep.
Have the humility to see it through.
Yep. And people are surprised sometimes that this is the advice you have to give people, but believe it or not, the other one is take the job. Take the job, because work begets work begets work in this business. And so it's like, take the job, meet people, build relationships, be excellent in that. It might not be what you want to do, 15 years from now, but start here now. Take the job, do it, build the relationships. Because like you said, that other person, they see how hard you work and they hire you on to the next project and on the next project. And pretty soon the producers are noticing you, the actors are noticing you, the directors are noticing you. You're getting hired as a personal assistant, and 15 years later, you're producing their feature films. And relationships are so important in this town, and so many of them start with people just being willing to take the job and do it to the best of their ability.
Absolutely. I remember, back to Ed Saxon, that's probably the hardest thing for me working for him, is he'd sometimes get on my case and say, Justin, get into the movie business. You don't know enough. You haven't watched enough films. You don't know who this director is. You don't know this writer. You don't read the trades enough. Like, if you really want to do this, you got to live it. You got to live and breathe this stuff. Like, could you go to dinner, with Martin Scorsese and talk film all night, and have Scorsese want to go watch a couple of the movies that you mentioned afterwards, right? Like, that kind of become my like you got to be interested. Like, you got to love it. You got to love cinema, right? I've had to get pushed a little bit that way. Like, just liking Lord of the Rings and Star Wars isn't enough.
That's right.
Like, if you want to produce or be a writer, if you want to be on the front end of packaging projects, like, just that awareness and reading more. And I've had to really be challenged to go deeper, because I kind of just expected Christian people to hand me money, right? That's, that was my lazy approach. I thought I could just throw myself out there and this would happen. No, you got to work and push. And sometimes I've been pushed in directions wasn't sure I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Too. Even now, I mean, this doesn't end. Even if you're producing or known as an indie producer or whatever, you will still get pushed into certain areas of producing or marketing, distribution. You're like, I don't know if I want to go here, and sometimes you got to. And there's wonderful things relationally and skill set wise on the other side of it.
It boggles my mind sometimes that we get applications at Act One from people who don't even like film and TV, and they want to write for film and TV, or they want to produce film and TV. And then, as they're describing themselves and stuff, it's like, well, I'm not really into film or television. I just feel like God's calling me. And I'm thinking, one of two things. One, you're probably, my guess is you're probably not going to last long.
Right.
But two, if for some reason by chance you do last at all, you'll be miserable.
God is calling you to suffer here.
because you're literally trying to make the stuff that you don't even like. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I absolutely agree with you that you have to be a fan. I'm not saying you have to love everything, but you have to love the art form, and you have to embrace the idea of what it means to make good television, what it means to make good film, what that is.
Right. Yeah, sir. What I was saying before, kind of like, evangelicals getting behind the power of cinema. Like, I do believe in the power of cinema. Don't get me. I believe in beauty. I believe in all that at the end of the day, that cinema can take you to new places and expand your world. And, you can be humbly receiving some, beautiful experience through it, or what. I believe in all that. So it's sort of this weird balance of, like, I believe in the power of cinema. I also believe in the limitations of cinema, that at the end of the day, that it's just a movie. But yeah, if you don't love it, if you're not like in it, if you're not, people can tell.
Yeah.
And for your own sake, for their sake and for your own sake, don't do it. And there's too many loads. There's too many times where it's painful. And I've had many times where I'm like, why am I still doing this? This is too hard. I should go get something consistent that just better after my family. And am I being selfish by continuing this? I have a lot of that stuff. but I just love it too much to stop. I love being a movie viewer and movie experiencer and a movie maker too much to stop, unfortunately. And I think a lot of that comes back to, it's actually a theological point of view that people have about how God works that I have some issues with. Like, what I believe is, like, whether I'm in Hollywood or not, like, God's going to move and do his thing. Like, God's going to speak, God's going to create waves, often through people we don't expect, filmmakers we don't expect. And some of our job as movie viewers, as critics, is to point that stuff out and say, hey, I spy, I see God's working in that one. I don't know how. It doesn't check the boxes in terms of being, it's not like the church is endorsing this thing and it's Christian people or what have you. But somehow there's something spiritually moving in that is kingdom oriented. I don't know. That's going to happen with or without me. And I just want to join the party. Like, I just want to be a part of it and help advance that and grow it. And but I've taken a little bit of pressure off myself of, like, I don't need to be the vehicle. Like, I'm not a fax machine. I'm not here to, like, fax the Christian message to Hollywood. You know what I mean? If I was interested in messaging, that's what I should do, is make fax machines and fax people the gospel. Like, we're, at the end of the day, we're making art and cinema here, and there's room for interpretation of the filmmakers. There's room for interpretation for the viewer, and that's beautiful and kind of messy and wild and weird all at the same time. So that the mystery of it is some of what I'm attracted to. And I think once you kind of, not that you give that up, it's, trust me, like, I want people to know who Jesus is. I do. But I knowing that I'm not the only one, and that I do it in community, and that I'm not that powerful at the end of the day, but knowing that I can contribute to that is releasing in a way that actually helps me to do better.
Justin, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, man. I think the world of you. You are such an amazing human being. Your kindness and your generosity, the way I see you, the way you treat people, is it's so refreshing. And you have such a fantastic reputation. And you have done so much for Act One, and so much for so many people that that I know. That I just want to thank you. Thank you for this time, and just thank you for being you, man.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy. That's sweet. You're getting me all teary over here, man. No, but I appreciate your leadership, and I love Act One. I'll always do whatever I can to help Act One. It's a place where I've learned a ton. It's a place where I've built a lot of friends, and in the last couple of years I haven't been as directly involved, but Act One's always in my life. I can't escape it. It's like, I don't know, all these tentacles of Act One throughout this entire town, man.
That's right. We're like the mafia.
That's right.
Well, if
an Act One handshake under the table right now.
That's right. Well, if it's okay with you, we close all of our. I've been closing all of our podcasts with praying for our guests. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to pray for you.
I'd love that.
Okay. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today, and thank you so much for the chance to be able to talk to Justin and spend this time with him and learn about him and learn from him. And God, I just pray right now that you would bless Justin and bless all that he does. I pray, God, that you'd bless his marriage, bless his relationship with his kids, with his family and friends. God, I pray that you would bless all of his work endeavors, these projects that he has coming up, these projects he has in post-production. And God, I pray you would continue to use Justin as a beacon of truth, goodness, and beauty in this business. I pray, God, that you would give him more and more opportunities to serve others and to love on others and to be a representative of you. And we just thank you for this time. We pray this in Jesus' name, and your promises we stand. Amen.
Thanks for listening to the Act One podcast, celebrating over 20 years as the premier training program for Christians in Hollywood. Act One is a Christian community of entertainment industry professionals who train and equip storytellers to create works of truth, goodness, and beauty. To financially support the mission of Act One or to learn more about our programs, visit us online at actoneprogram.com.